Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. So this time we're going to talk about something that seems to be out of sight and out of mind. You create these Incus containers, you install applications, and sometimes you forget that each container is running its own OS version. So this one is about upgrading Incus containers. So all of my Incus servers were migrated originally from LXD servers. And quite a few of my Incus containers are 5 years old and older, and many began as LXC containers. So I have Incus containers running Ubuntu as old as version 18.04. And so many subscribers have asked how to upgrade the OS version inside of an Incus container, and that's what I'm going to discuss today. As a good example for this video, I've selected my web server, so I signed on to the Incus container that I have called Web Home. And my web server is somewhat dated, and it really doesn't receive a lot of maintenance nowadays. Back in couple of years ago, I used to publish documents over there, and I rarely do that, and it really is in need of some maintenance here. So the first thing that we really want to do before we do any updates on a container is you want to run over to your Incus server. In my case, that is VMS Rain, and we want to take a snapshot of that container before we do any upgrades at all. So I'm doing an Incus snapshot create. Web Home is the name of the container, and then before -upgrade is going to be the name of the snapshot that I'm taking. I know that command seemed impossibly fast, and just to verify that it worked, we can do an Incus snapshot list on Web Home. And there we are, we have before -upgrade, and you can see that that snapshot is in fact in existence. Now that we have a nice safe snapshot restore point, we can go over here to Web Home, and you'll notice that Web Home is running Ubuntu 20.04. And when we upgrade, we'll have to upgrade from 2004 to 2204, and then from 2204 to 2310, and finally from 2310 to 2404. And the reason they don't support an upgrade now from 2204 directly to 2404 is because even though Ubuntu version 2404 was released in April of 2024, the straight upgrade won't be available until approximately August. So when you're going to do an upgrade, before you do the upgrade, the most important thing is you want to do a sudo apt update first. And the idea is you want to go and take all of the updates that are available. And like I said before, we have no guarantee that the packages that we have currently running on this machine will run under the new OS or the new upgrades. And that's why I took a snapshot. And it's always a good idea to take a snapshot before doing any upgrades on any machine. So now I'm doing a sudo apt upgrade, and I'm taking all 5 of the upgrades that it found there for this version of Ubuntu 2004 with the installed applications. Now that we've taken the appropriate upgrades, we can go ahead and do a sudo do -release -upgrade. And it goes ahead and checks for the new updates. Now, normally you won't have this take place And I'm going to go ahead and show you something else that you are more than likely to run into. Just recall that containers are normally extremely lightweight. And because of the lightweight nature of containers, they don't often have all the utilities installed that you require. The reason that I was able to do the do release upgrade without anything additional being added in is because in the past I have upgraded this container from Ubuntu 18.04 to Ubuntu 20.04, I recall a couple of years ago. So if you are getting ready to update a container and you execute the command do release upgrade and it comes back and says that it doesn't know what that command is, you're going to want to do a sudo apt install ubuntu-release-upgrader-core. And in this particular case, of course, it is already completely upgraded. So now we'll go ahead and do a sudo do-release-upgrade, and it will say that it is checking for a new Ubuntu release. And now, of course, it has found a new release, and in this particular case, it's not calling out this release yet. I don't believe, yes, it is. It is calling out Jammy, and of course, Jammy is Ubuntu 22.04. So we go ahead and say, yes, I want to continue. And then it says, to make recovery in case failure easier, an additional SSH daemon will be started on port 1022. And if anything goes wrong, you can still connect to SSH at port 1022. I have yet to use this failsafe option, but it's pretty safe to update from SSH here. So I went ahead and hit enter to continue, and it's going to go out and grab all of the dependencies and determine what is required for the upgrade. After just a couple of minutes, you get an upgrade summary, and it says here that one installed package is no longer supported by Canonical, but you can still get support from the community. 19 packages are going to be removed, and 119 new packages are going to be installed, and 596 packages are going to be upgraded. And it says you have to download a total of 354 megabytes, and this download will take about 1 minute with my connection. So I'll say yes, go ahead and continue. All upgrades are going to be a little bit different depending upon the installed applications on your container, and you can see here that I have one that says that there was failure starting the MySQL component, and since I'm running a WordPress on my website, it requires the MySQL database. But we're not really worried about this error because MySQL will restart after the upgrade is completed and the system reboots. So I simply hit enter here. So after a fair amount of time, I had a pop-up here that asked about my Samba configuration, and I didn't really realize I had Samba running on this. But in any event, when you get these pop-up messages that say, do you want to install the new version or to keep the local version currently installed of whatever configuration file that it may call out, more than likely you want to keep the version that you currently have installed as opposed to taking a new version, and that is so it does not change your existing configuration. So I went ahead and tabbed down to OK, and I'm hitting enter, and the update continues. As we near the end of the upgrade, it'll come back and ask you if you want to remove obsolete packages, and the answer to that should be yes, to minimize the size of your container. Plus, there's no real good reason why we should keep the old packages. So it goes out and it removes all of the old packages. So at this point, it's reasonable to point out that my application happened to be a web server, and that web server runs what we call a LAMP stack. And LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, or some version of SQL, and PHP. And one of the significant differences between Ubuntu 2004 and 2204 that we're upgrading to is that version 2004 uses PHP version 7.4, whereas Ubuntu 2204 uses PHP version 8.1. And that may be a significant difference that may affect your application. In any event, you see here on the screen where it says restart is required, and to finish the upgrade, go ahead and type Y to do a reboot. I hit enter, and it goes back to my desktop and disconnects from the container instance while it is rebooting. After a relatively short period of time, I SSH back to web home, and it connects to the container, and as you can see here, it's running Ubuntu 22.04. So now the real question is, does the website still run under Ubuntu 22.04? And in my test, it did not. And the reason for that is because you have to be aware of the requirements of your applications. And in this particular case, Ubuntu 20.04 comes with PHP version 7.4, whereas Ubuntu 22.04 comes with PHP version 8.1. So in order to fix that problem, if I go over here and sudo to root, I did a sudo a2 disable module PHP 7.4 and then enable PHP module 8.1, and then I did a systemctl restart on the Apache 2 service. And once I did that, then I was in good shape. And now if we come over to my web browser and go to Scotti-BYTE.com, we're able to bring up the website. So now that we're at Ubuntu 22.04, we want to search for the next available Ubuntu upgrade. And so we do a sudo do-release-upgrade again, and it checks for a new Ubuntu release. But since the Ubuntu release that follows 22.04 is 23.10, and as I mentioned earlier, we can't go from 22.04 directly to 24.04, we're going to have to do a sudo nano on this file that they mention here, /etc/upgrade manager /release-upgrades. So I go ahead and copy that and paste that in here, and you go down here to where it says that the upgrade mode is LTS, and we're going to change that to normal. So I do a Control O and enter, and a Control X to exit the nano editor. And now I do the sudo do-release-upgrade once again, and this time it will find the Ubuntu 23.10 upgrade, and I go ahead and tell it to continue. And then once again, continue. And then I press enter. After a short period of time, it tells me that one installed package is no longer supported by Canonical, that 17 packages are going to be removed, and 101 new packages are going to be installed, and 576 are going to be upgraded. And it says that I'm going to have to download 339 megabytes, and on my internet connection, that should take about 1 minute. Actually, it says on a 40 megabit connection, so I'm a lot faster than that. So let's go ahead and say yes to continue, and it goes ahead and fetches the updates And now once again, I get the error message that says that my SQL won't restart, which is just fine because it will after the reboot. So I go ahead and hit enter and it continues. And now I've come to a point in the Ubuntu 23.10 upgrade where it's asking me if I want to replace this package for syslog. And as I mentioned earlier, any conf packages typically answer no to these because that way you'll get the configuration that you're currently using. And again, it'll say that there's a new version of the smb.conf file. And if you're using SMB, you probably want to keep the local version that's currently installed, because if you pick the package maintainer's version and you have a configuration set, it'll clear that configuration out. So a lot of these things, you want to answer those questions accordingly depending upon what you have installed on your system. And here's another one of those pop-ups, but for apache.conf this time. And we want to answer no to it again because we know we have an existing Apache installation. And here's another one. I'll just go ahead and blow through these and keep selecting no because pretty typically I just want to go ahead and do that. And you notice, by the way, that this said it's taking on PHP version 8.2 and we're running 8.1 in Apache now. So it's possible that we may have to fix our website again by changing the version of PHP. We'll see after the reboot. And now we have the prompt to remove the obsolete packages, and I'm going to answer yes to that. And finally, I get prompted for a reboot, and I'll go ahead and say yes. And now that the reboot has been completed, I do an SSH over to Web Home, and there we are at Ubuntu 23.10. And just as a test, I went over to my web page here and repainted it, and it comes back up. So the web server is running correctly. Now let's do our final upgrade to Ubuntu 24.04, and we're going to do that just like before with a sudo do-release-upgrade. And it will search for a new upgrade, asking for my sudo password. And we tell it to continue. And it found the upgrade to Ubuntu 24.04, which is Noble Numbat. And so we'll go ahead and tell it to continue. And we press enter and it starts. And now for our upgrade from Ubuntu 23.10 to 24.04, it says that 2 installed packages are no longer supported by Canonical, but 70 packages are going to be removed, 98 new packages are going to be installed, and 596 packages are going to be upgraded, and it has to download a total of 367 megabytes. So I'll go ahead and say go, and it begins the upgrade. And finally, in the upgrade process, after several prompts to retain conf files, I got to the end point here where it asked if I want to remove the obsolete packages. And you notice above here there's a few cases where we've got a failure in the Apache service, and that's simply because we'll have to go through a reboot. But I'll say yes to go ahead and delete the obsolete packages. And finally, we're prompted for a reboot. Now that the reboot is completed, let's go ahead and SSH over to Web Home. And we sign in, and here we see that we are under Ubuntu 24.04. So our final test will be to go over here to our web browser and go to Scotti-BYTE.com, and sure enough, our web page comes up. At this point, I've updated my Incus container that's running my web server from Ubuntu 20.04 to 22.04 to 23.10 and finally to 24.04 LTS. And here we have the snapshot listed, and we no longer need that snapshot since we've established that this works. So we can go ahead and say Incus snapshot delete on web home before upgrade. And then if we list our snapshot again with an Incus snapshot list web home, we should see that we don't have any snapshots. And finally, one of the reasons we deleted that snapshot was because snapshots make the backups larger. And so I can do an Incus export on web home, and that'll go ahead and create me a backup export tar.gz file that I can import to any other server, and also one that serves as a standalone backup. So in summary, in my home lab, most of my containers are Ubuntu and Debian. And so it's important to note that older OS versions may be losing support. That is, they may not provide any upgrades in the future, but more importantly, they might not provide any security patches. And in order to keep your home lab secure, you always want to be running the latest updates. So upgrading older containers is easy following the few simple steps that I've covered in this video. And so be sure to take a snapshot before any container upgrades in the event that your installed applications do not run properly under the new OS variant. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell, and we'll see you next time.